Hey everybody. Welcome to the Hey Everybody podcast, episode 52, which though math was never my strongest suit, by my math means we've been doing this for a year. And thank you for coming along on the ride. Thank you for watching these and communicating with me and sharing them with your friends, and especially thank you to anyone that's contributed. The world is it's reopening, but for an independent musician like myself, it's not getting any less difficult or weird. So doing this podcast has helped me in a lot of ways. It's given me something to focus on. It's given me a routine to focus on, and it's frankly helped out financially in a world where my income went away for a while, and even now that it's back, it's not back the way other incomes usually are. I don't have a reliable, it's feast and famine, basically. Those are the two settings, and the feasts are pretty small. But I'm thrilled to be back. I'm thrilled that the world is starting to reopen, for the obvious reasons that it means we're getting a handle on this COVID thing, hopefully, and people are starting to look out for each other and do what they need to do to keep their communities safe. But also because I get to go back to doing one of the things I love to do, which is play music for people. I played 2 shows last week. I played a solo show in Galena, Illinois. Tori and I drove about 3.5 hours and stayed overnight in Galena, Illinois to play for those wonderful people. And then on Friday, I had the band for our first big, loud rock and roll show back. We were in Stevens Point at a great little festival called Riverfront Rendezvous. And we had a really good time, and it felt really good to play with those guys again. I'm always sort of pulled between the two because they're very different, the solo show and the band show, and I get very different things out of them, and I love them both, but occasionally each feels like a distraction or a subtraction from the other. More often, I'm happy that I get to do both. I'm happy that I have found a way to not have to choose between rock and roll and camaraderie and energy and power, and then on the other hand, intimacy and deeper connection and storytelling and all that kind of stuff. So getting to do both is really good, but truthfully, it can occasionally feel conflicting. And meanwhile, the last decade of my life or more, I've really, really wanted to be in a bluegrass band. When I started the band I'm in now, the intention was that it would be a bluegrass band. I decided to start a band at a bluegrass festival with my dad, and I decided I was going to come home and I was going to put an outfit together and start playing shows. I did not have access to the necessary people, the necessary musicians and instruments and that kind of thing. So I sort of fell into, I have a kind of country band, and it became a rock and roll band very naturally and organically. So all that to say, I wish I was 3 people. What I wanted to talk about today, and I feel like this new format, which I'm still sort of getting used to, might facilitate a little more focus. I'm intrigued by the idea of having one thing I want to talk about. And I'm still Christopher Gold, so it's going to be sprawling and rambly and that kind of thing. Unwieldy. But I like the idea of sitting down at my desk with y'all and talking about a thing and drinking some coffee and hopefully getting your feedback and that kind of thing. Last week, we talked about what big tech and social media are doing to our minds and how that should lead to empathy from one side to another. And that's not a popular concept. People like their sides nowadays. And I guess I'm more interested in right and wrong and thoughts and behaviors than I am in sides, and obviously I have a side. I vote. I've voted every opportunity I've gotten since I turned 18, and I have voted Democrat every time. But I feel no loyalty to them. I don't feel like that's what politicians are for. I don't feel like I'm meant to, like, people make a sport out of it, right? They get their t-shirt and their mug and their hat, and it's like, why? Like, what do you get out of that you'll be honest in admitting that you get a sense of maybe superiority, or you get to be combative, and deep down maybe we like that a little bit. I sort of feel like a politician is there to do a job, and I pick the one I think will do the best job and do it with a moral code similar to mine, or as close to mine as they can get while still being a politician. But at the end of the day, I feel no loyalty. I feel no rah-rah. I feel like, do the job and do it the way I want you to do it, or I'll get a new guy in there. You know what I mean? It would be a terrible way to say, like, run my band, but it's a great way to treat a politician. You are there to do a job, and you are there to do the job you said you would do the way you said you would do it. And I've never understood the sort of flag waving for a politician who doesn't know you and probably doesn't really care that much, any more than I've understood an inability to criticize your guy, and the first step in being able to do that is not identifying him as your guy or your gal. Like, I'll tell you what Obama did that I didn't like, and I'll tell you my reservations I had about Hillary and Biden and all that kind of stuff, whilst also saying, like, I voted for them because I thought it was the best call. But with all this swirling around in my mind all of the time, I felt this way from the beginning, because I come from punk rock, and one of the foundations of punk rock is this no kings, no gods, no masters kind of vibe. And in America, politicians are trying to be all three of those things all the time, and I'm not up for it. Any more than I'm for any, like, loyalty pledge or sign here to join our organization. I don't want none of that. I'm in an organization. It's called the Gold Family, and we rock. So Tuesday morning, I wake up in Galena, Illinois, where I played the night before. It was wonderful. I wake up and I realize that I'm very near a record store that I quite like. It's not a Wisconsin record store, and I don't really want to spill too much, like, which record store it is, because that's not what this podcast is about. I'm not here leaving shitty Yelp reviews for anybody. But we realized, Tori and I, that we're very close to this record store that I love, and we decide we're going to shoot over there and visit this record store that we always stop at when we're passing through. So we head over there. I have a successful dig through the crates and find a handful of things that over the next couple of weeks I'm sure we'll be talking about. And we're just sort of putzing around the store, getting ready to check out, but not quite ready to check out yet. And I see this big wall of mugs. Like a lot of record stores, this particular record store isn't just a record store. They sell a lot of other things. And one of the things they sold was mugs. And it's run by this old hippie, so a lot of the mugs are like in that vibe, about, taking down the power and follow me to Woodstock and that kind of stuff. But I immediately noticed that most of them now were political. And this is not something that was the case in years past. I've been visiting this record store for probably getting close to 10 years now. And immediately that bummed me out. The existence of a political mug itself bums me out. Because again, what are we doing? Is this entertainment? Is it a team thing? Because that's not how I look at it, and that's not what I want it to be. Is it important? Because if it's as important as people are trying to convince us that it is, why are we trivializing it by making mugs and that kind of thing? And furthermore, whether we're prepared to admit it or not, the existence of these shirts and hats and mugs and all this kind of stuff ends conversation, frankly. I have a handful of friends on the other side of the political divide or the religious divide or the social divide or what have you, where because our bond initially was over music or art or film or sports or whatever, when we later learned that we disagreed about guns or taxes or education or war or whatever, we had this foundation already of like, but you're cool and I'm cool and we could talk about it. And I feel grateful every day that I have people that I can talk to that disagree with me. Those are the most interesting, beneficial conversations for all of us, I think. But when you show up in a hat or a shirt or what have you, it's not exactly painting a picture that you are welcoming and up for a chat. You might be, but the fact is you have put out a message before you've gotten to put out an ounce of your personality or your vibe. And I remember I read in a magazine many years ago, this like pastor of a church was saying, you know, I have shirts that deal with religion or faith or what have you. And when I wear them, people don't approach me. But I also play the guitar and I have a t-shirt that says Fender. And when I wear that, people go, hey, a Fender man. All right, I'm a Fender man myself. And they get to talking and he gets to know people. And maybe sometimes they even show up at his church the next week. And I don't know if that should be the goal, but that's a fact that the stuff we put out, our messaging via hats, t-shirts, and mugs, can more often than not keep a conversation from starting. So I'm looking at all these mugs, and the next thing I notice is that there are mugs of every kind. So he's got the I Heart Obama mug, which is a weird thing. You don't know Obama. You couldn't possibly love him. And he's a flawed man. This is not going to be a popular podcast, but neither was last week. There's I'm with her mugs and all kinds of stuff, you know, Democratic Party mugs. But then I noticed there's also Make America Great Again mugs, and there's you know, Build the Wall mugs and all these kind of things. And my first thought was, this old hippie guy who runs this store has sort of thrown in the towel in his fight against just pure capitalism. In that this wall of mugs could not possibly represent what one individual believes. So it must represent a desire to sell mugs over whatever he believes. So right there, that sort of subverts the idea that like, this is the most important thing in the world, these beliefs that I have, because you're also sort of marketing for the other side as well, you know. I don't post anybody else's tour dates on my website, if that makes any sense. But then what really struck me is that the mugs were in their packaging. They were all in little boxes, so you could just grab one and buy it, I guess, if you wanted to, if you didn't have this radical, hey, everybody mug like I got. And because they were still in their packaging, you could see that they were all made by the same company. And that struck me, not as a new notion, but as evidence of what I have known. Which is, while this country is being ripped apart and friendships are ending and people aren't attending family gatherings and we're yelling and physically fighting each other at times, part of that is being fueled by this merchandise, which is very often made by the same company. There's a company somewhere making mugs that does not care how your Thanksgiving goes. It does not care which side politically is going to be more or less destructive to the social and moral well-being of this country. It doesn't care, because they're just betting on both sides in an effort to sell you a mug. And that bums me out bad, because I wonder, there are times you should absolutely have a side. I'm not a hippie saying, oh, it's just peace and love, man. No. Sometimes you gotta pick a side. And I think the best hippies knew that. That's where like the protest movement comes from. And I like to say all my favorite hippies used to be punks. I have love for the hippies of the right variety. Just like I have love for the punks of the right variety. Some are just nihilistic and destructive, and I'm bored. I'm not saying you never pick a side. I'm not. What I'm saying is, some of the people that are trying to get you to pick a side are not doing it because they believe in anything. And they're not doing it because they're aware that when you pick this side, it might mean you have Thanksgiving alone. Or it might mean you develop anxiety about the state of things for your children. And it might mean that you ignore global warming. It might mean any number of things. They don't care. What they care is that you have $20 and they want that $20. And if pumping you up to stay tribal and stay on your side will get them that $20, they don't care what else it costs you. And they don't care, and in fact, they don't want actual progress to be made. Because if progress is made, they're going to sell less shit. So we're forced to ask now, where else is this happening? We know for a fact that many of these politicians go to the same weddings and the same after bars and the same fundraising events. So what is being done to us? Much the same way last week we talked about big tech and social media companies really rewiring for the worse our brains so that we will be upset and stay on their platform. How high up the ladder do you have to go if you already see it in the mug world to realize that there are people benefiting from our division and we are suffering because of it? We're making less progress. I promise you this. If you put me and some of my friends in charge of presenting an idea for what to do about guns in this country, we'll get it to you by the end of the day. Get us a pizza and a 6-pack of beer, and I'll get my Republican buddies over here. I'll get my liberal punk hippie buddies over here, and we'll figure it out. Because when we talk to each other, we realize, like, oh, you don't think you should be allowed to own a tank? And you believe that, like, there are safety precautions that could be taken and certain regulations you wouldn't oppose. And then they go, oh, you don't think that the police should go door to door and just confiscate things from people? And all of a sudden, because nobody's trying to nurture division for their own gain, we have at least the beginnings of a plan. And it might not even be a good plan, but the fact that it's an existing plan is more than politicians have brought to us in the past few years. And some of this is oversimplified, and some people will say I'm like sitting on the fence or whatever. But I have no problem admitting to you guys that I'm a very liberal guy. I believe in the tenets of equality and equity and feminism and LGBTQ rights and anti-racism and all this kind of stuff. But the systems that we have been placed under are just telling you that that's what they believe too, and I'm not always sure that they actually do. So how much of our loyalty are they deserving of, given that information? And shouldn't every mug just be a hey everybody mug? Drinking a lot of coffee today. I'm reminded that I was playing some shows in Appleton for Mile of Music, the festival, and I end up, you play a lot for a few days. And I have this song called Devils that is about my general distaste for the political system and the politicians that hold it up. And I would say things like, I don't really believe that any politician is really on your side. I don't believe that any politician, because you don't very often see them sacrifice. The reason Australia got the gun control passed that they did is because factually some politicians said, I'm going to lose my job for supporting this, but it's the right thing to do. And they did, and they lost their job. You would be hard-pressed to come up with a lengthy list of American politicians that have sacrificed their career to do what was right. And I talk about these things on stage. And I talk about, at the end of the day, when there's a real problem, it's our communities and our neighbors and our friends and our families that come together to fix the problems. And the politicians generally don't show up. So I'm doing this song at multiple shows throughout this festival. And I get word that someone has taken to social media to level the critique at me that Christopher Gold needs to pick a side. And first of all, I don't. And second of all, I have. I'm on your side. If you are struggling, if you are being marginalized, if you are being oppressed, if you are being held back, I am on your side. The difference is what I think that should mean and where we should turn for help and a leg up and that kind of thing. And there's plenty of function for the government in all that. But are they doing it? Or are they mostly trying to say, keep buying the shirts, keep buying the mugs, keep hooting and hollering and coming to our rallies and waving flags and treating this thing like pro wrestling, because nothing's going to get fixed, but we're going to make a big fat bag of cash. And in the meantime, some stuff is going to get irreparably wrecked. And we're not going to care, because we're going to say it was them and they're going to say it was us. And we're both going to kind of knowingly look at each other and go like, checks are clearing though, am I right? And again, I'm not a polemicist or anything like that. I'm not even sure I just used that word right. But if you came to the punk rock tattooed folk singing hippie mindful idiot looking for his thoughts, those are my thoughts today as I remember standing in front of a wall of mugs made by one company telling us who we should hate, who we should be scared of, and who we should be divided from. And I know some of you aren't going to like it. That's fine. Start a podcast. Let's talk music, though, shall we? Today, we have this record called Two Coyotes by Roger Harvey. Roger Harvey's from Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken. And these days, he makes this kind of country, occasionally rockin', occasionally cosmic country music. And I really like it. I like a lot of the stuff he has to say. I like his approach to a lot of things. And I like that he comes from a background of punk rock. I love it when a punk takes all those principles and ethics and goes like, but what if I played some country music? Or what if I played some folk music? Or what if we start a bluegrass band? Or that kind of thing. I think it's really interesting. So listen to the song Gold on this record. It really speaks to me. Fair warning, there is some language in it. But I encourage you to listen to it while reading the lyrics and don't get thrown by the language. I think sometimes from all sides we have a tendency to hear a word or a phrase and immediately stop really taking things in. So there's some swears in this song. Everything's going to be fine. Up next, if you're not into the country music, how's about some ska? This band is called The Interrupters, and this record is called Fight the Good Fight. I've been kind of obsessed with this band lately. Their sound is sort of like second wave ska, which is not as heavy on the horns, but a lot of like B3 organ and really cool. Think like the Specials with English beat, that kind of thing. I really dig it, and it's fun because their guitar player is also an engineer and a producer, and he works a lot with a lot of other bands I like in like the Epitaph family. He's played organ on the last few Rancid records, and he plays with the Transplants and that kind of thing. So listen to Gave You Everything by The Interrupters and just have a good time. And as I leave you, it will be with a plea to not mistake anything that I've had to say today for complacency or any of that stuff. I'm not saying to not pick a side. I'm just saying, how are you picking your side? Who is encouraging you to pick that side? How effective is it in communicating the things you want to communicate and changing the things you want to change, to do it from such a tribal place? Because anybody who has a problem with what I've had to say here today has probably not had as many interactions as I have this past week with people who disagree with me. And I have changed some minds with this approach, and that's why I want to share it with people, because I do think we need to change people's minds and change people's hearts. But I honestly believe at this point that the first step is putting that mug down, take that hat off, and get to know this person. Because once you understand maybe why they were susceptible to hate or anger or resentment or whatever, or fear, so much fear, you might have a better idea of how to start dismantling those things for them. And you'll be better at it in the long run. So, please don't be mad at me. People get mad at me sometimes. People on the left get mad at me more often than people on the right, which is funny, because I spent 4 years on stage telling everybody what I thought about Donald Trump. And sometimes on stage I can be a little bit less reserved than I am here on the podcast. All right. I say it a lot, and it's how I end shows. It's often how I end the podcast, but it's genuinely what I believe in. If someone said, you're about to die and you can say one thing to the world and they'll take it real serious, I would say, take care of yourself, take care of somebody else, and it'll get better. All right, I'm gonna go eat some pizza. I'll see you soon. Bye.